What is the capital of Peru? Part 2 of 3 by Aldrich Chase. Dan and his class are visiting the local museum, led by their teacher, Mr. Fripp. Dan has already misbehaved, and he is on his final warning as they walk down a recreation of the old town street. What further trouble will Dan get into? They trudged along a made-up street that was designed to show their town had once been clean and neat and pleasant long ago. Dan's Gramps had said that, truth to tell, they had left out the dirt and smell. The shop windows were brightly lit, and some you could go in. The toy shop had a wooden train, and soldiers made of tin, and skipping ropes and marbles too, and tops that kids could spin. The tailor sold his suits and shirts to make a gent look flash. A waxwork barber bent to trim his customer's moustache. A bank clerk sat, frozen in time, while adding up some cash. A waxwork horse hauled on a cart, with not a car in sight. The undertaker's hearse and horse were blacker than the night. A sturdy blacksmith worked his forge that glowed with orange light. They stopped before worn-down stone steps that led up to a door. A plaque announced this was the school from many years before. They followed Mr. Fripp inside and gaped at what they saw. Sad waxwork kids at wooden desks were seated row on row. They sat up straight and faced the front, as though they were on show. Their glassy eyes were locked upon the man who was their foe. This teacher wore a long black gown, as though he were a bat, and perched upon his short grey hair he wore a square black hat, that had a tassel at one end, and on the top was flat. His face was turned towards his class, a harsh, unblinking stare, made worse by bulging eyes of glass that pinned kids with their glare, while clinging to his sneering lip a little moustache held its grip. This waxwork man, behind his desk, stood pointing with his cane towards a country on a globe, as though it could explain the hate and fear inside the room that hung there like a stain. Dan guessed the teacher had just asked a question few would know. The only child whose hand was raised sat in the second row. This girl with pigtails stretched her arm as high as it would go. The desk behind this gifted girl was empty of its kid, but in the corner stood a boy, turned so his face was hid. A cone-shaped cap sat on his head, as if it were a lid. Between the desks there was an aisle, which Dan's class wandered down. Dan thought, this room is cold and vile. He followed with a frown. No child in here would crack a smile, or dare to play the clown. You cannot teach, said Mr. Fripp, by using fear to keep your grip, and those who choose to wield the cane gain nothing by inflicting pain. A love of learning slowly grows, and is not helped by stinging blows. That boy stood in the corner there, who hangs his head in sad despair, wears what they call a duncer's cap, a hurt as sharp as any slap, because the teacher thinks he's dim, and wants to make a fool of him. But how is he to raise his game, when all he does is stand in shame? Dan very quickly became bored as Mr. Fripp droned on. He heard each word as it occurred, but he remembered none. This lengthy speech was best ignored, and soon they would be gone. Dan had stopped halfway down the aisle, with gab and sash ahead. He saw Gab turn to Sash and smile, and he heard what she said. That swotty girl with her raised hand is just the sort that I can't stand. I bet she would look down on us and act as though we're dumb. And if we said, let's go somewhere, you know she'd never come. But I can fix the little swat, I'll use my piece of gum. Sash said, she's just a waxwork, Gab. Why get into a state? This place is stupid, dull and drab, and it's not worth the hate. But Gab took from her mouth a blob, and said, this gum will do the job. Gab rolled the pink and mushy lump upon her finger-tip, to make it soft and round and plump, with just a little grip, for she was master of the trick of how to launch gum with a flick. The swat sat with her back to Gab, who sighted on her hair, and prepared for a power flick to send the missile there. But what she had not thought about was that someone might care. Although Dan loved to play the clown, and jokes were his delight, inside him, if you dug deep down, you'd find a gentle knight. He was the man to stop Gab's plan, because it was not right. Dan stepped forward and nudged Gab's arm. Her shot went high and wide. Gab turned on Dan with icy calm, and he felt sick inside. He knew she meant to do him harm, and he'd nowhere to hide. But Sash grabbed Gab and turned her round, then pointed with a grin. Dan looked to see what she had found, and knew they'd scored a win. Gab's gum had gone and landed on the waxwork teacher's chin. It sat there like a big pink wart, and clung on in plain sight. But no one spoke, and so Dan thought things might turn out all right. They'd done the deed, but not been caught, which filled him with delight. Dan thought, we have this teacher tamed in this most loathsome school, and Gab and I have not been blamed, which makes it pretty cool. There's nothing here I need to fear, so I can act the fool. Dan slipped his way past Gab and Sash, and walked towards his goal, the empty desk behind the girl, the target of his stroll. He slid onto its wooden seat, as if he'd filled a hole. He stuck his hand up and cried out, I need the toilet, sir, for sometimes it can spray about when accidents occur. It's too much for this small inkwell, besides it leaves a nasty smell. A look of horror settled on the face of Mr. Fripp, as though he wished they'd never gone upon this nightmare trip, while classmates laughed and gave loud cheers, which fell as music on Dan's ears. Dan's gleeful heart began to pound. He loved to cause a stir, but from the front there came a sound that was a high-pitched whir. The teacher's globe was spinning round. The countries were a blur. Then suddenly the globe had stopped, as if an unseen hand upon the turning world had dropped, or issued some command. What did it mean? What had Dan seen? He could not understand. Did you see what the globe did, sir? He called to Mr. Fripp, who did not seem to hear, but said, We'll press on with our trip. This place is not a happy one. It makes my spirits dip. Dan's classmates started filing out, as though he were not there. He called, Look at me, at this desk! I did this for a dare! You called me daft and cheered and laughed, but now you just don't care. He looked around in disbelief. How could he be ignored? He'd give his classmates heaps of grief once contact was restored, but now was not the time to moan, or he'd be left here all alone. He tried to get up from his desk, but found he had no luck. He wriggled, squirmed, and vainly pushed, yet still he remained stuck. No matter how he tried to fight, his legs were trapped and wedged in tight. I'm stuck! Please wait for me, he cried, but no one seemed to hear. It's me! It's Dan! I have not died, he called with mounting fear. and panic building in his gut, but no one heard. The school door shut. What terrors await Dan in the classroom of the old town school? Find out in part 3.